Don't let anybody ever tell you that living in America is not so good. Let me know where he is. I'll blacken his eyes.
America has been in many wars. Brave soldiers such as Mel have defended her and her interests to make her what she is today.
When were you born?
I was born June 5th, 1917. My father's out of World War I. The ruling was, if you were married, you went, and if you had a child, you stayed. So he says, how old is he? He says, about 2 hours. The guy said, that's what I call timing.
Where did you grow up?
Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Heck yes. I lived only a block away from Keith Avenue School. I could sit here until when the bell rang and run through the Dutchman's yard and be in my 60-foot Hardyville window. High school. My father didn't like high schools. He sent me to a vocational school where you could learn a trade at the same time. And I studied watch and clock repair because he said, Bill, I wasn't physically fit to be so strenuous. Well, that changed in a hurry. We purchased a 26-foot sailboat. We used to go out on Lake Michigan with that. Oh, we had more fun. Oh. And like I said, then came the war, and I was the first one to go. I don't know whatever happened to our ship.
September 1st, 1939, World War II begins. There were two conflicts going on at opposite ends of the world. On the western side of the United States, Japan was conflicting with China to gain overall power and expand the reign. On the eastern side of the United States, Europe was quickly falling to Hitler's rule in Germany. Each country's goal was to be a superpower and rule the world. Japan was quickly taking over Japan and wanted more Pacific islands near the United States. One day, on December 7th, Japan launched a surprise attack on the United States by bombing Pearl Harbor. After this attack, the United States declared war on Japan. United States troops were then sent to Europe in alliance with the Soviet Union. Hitler had killed millions of Jewish civilians in an attempt to create a pure race. The United States was now in a two-front war. As the United States and its allied forces took over more land and grew closer to Germany's capital, the United States decided to allow that the Soviet Union move forward into Berlin. When Berlin was taken over, victory was announced in Europe. Unfortunately, the United States had a long war to fight in Japan.
I lost a good buddy. He wanted to be a Marine, and he was on the Arizona at Pearl Harbor on December 7th. He got it with the first bomb the Japs dropped. And they came on Christmas Eve to tell his father, your son's missing in action. I thought that was rotten. He'd been just as dead 2 days later. He was my best friend. We had it decided ahead of time. We were going to build a duplex. One of us was going to be upstairs, one downstairs. We were going to be friends forever. Japanese changed it for us.
Mel was one of the brave Americans that served in the Pacific Theater.
Why did you join the military?
Because I'll tell you, truth is stated, I loved horseback riding, and my My buddy said, "Hey, Birdie, I found a place where they pay us to ride the horses. I didn't have to go to an academy. I joined F Troop, 105th Cavalry."
Oh, cool.
And when they saw what Hitler's Wehrmacht did to the Polish cavalry, it was very apparent a horse can't stand up against a tank. And the horses all got wings and flew away, and we became artillery. I ended up being this, like I said, in artillery, and I fired a cannon, which was known as a 105 millimeter howitzer, at a range of 5 to 7 miles. 5 if you're shooting into the wind, 7 if you got the wind on your back. And I know we got hits, because sometimes infantry that were being relieved came through our guns section and says, "Hey, you guys, there's a lot of spare fighting the Japs for 31 months. That's
Wow.
almost 3 years.
Wow.
But to this day, I hate them. You look in my house, you don't see anything that's bought that was made in Japan.
Wow.
It's bought in America. It's made in America. I had Ford, Chevys, and Buicks, not Hondas. Stateside was Louisiana. It took a place down south where they trained us. And then one day we got orders to move, and we drove our army trucks all the way through the south, all the way through even New York City. Thought that was the real, because those guys don't try cutting through a convoy. They drive like they're nuts. Well, we got up to Fort Devens, Massachusetts, was a base about 10 miles outside of Boston. And everybody says, "Oh boy, Ireland, here we come." We all thought and on Palm Sunday, our captain came out and said, "Sir," he says to us, "there'll be no passage today. I want those vehicles up on those flat cars, wheels chopped, wired down." Now what in the hell? We got on that and we started going west. We hit Chicago, we went southwest. Then we hit Texas, and we ended up in San Francisco. Then they started again. "I'll bet we're going to Hawaii." And we did. "I'll bet we're going to Alaska." Well, we ended up in Australia. It was very, very nice when we were stationed down there. Their men had all been drafted. They were in Africa fighting Rommel. They had no defense. The Japs were already in their northern territory. Compared to America, they were in like Maine, Vermont, and New Hampshire. As far as and we got in there, we kicked their little yellow asses off of there. Then we went up in the island right above it, New Guinea. That was a little bit different. It had the destroyers, the Russell and the Morris, and we'd be out there side by side, and we'd radio them, pick out a target, and that's how we learned how to direct the Navy fire, so that we wouldn't be killing our own men when we made beach landings. And it worked out really good. I said to him, "You could see when the Japs were building that bridge. How come we didn't blow that?" He says, "Let the little yellow blankety cusses work their asses off." He said, "The day they get it done, we'll blow it." Sure enough, the day they got that bridge done, bam! All gone. All that work for nothing. Oh, God. We laughed until the tears rolled down our cheeks.
The United States wrote the Potsdam Declaration, which provided Japanese forces the opportunity to surrender. They declined. August 6, 1945. The United States dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima, Japan, as a point to prove America's forces. Shortly after, the United States dropped a second bomb on Nagasaki.
But we got them out of New Guinea too, and not by what we did, but by what our government did. They got a plane to fly over there, and they dropped one on Nagasaki and one on Hiroshima. When you destroy two cities, where every man, woman, child, cat, and dog, everything gets killed, the Japs decided time was come to surrender, and they came into the surrender table and they signed the papers. And every one of those Japs that signed those papers went out and committed suicide. They thought they had sold their country down. They couldn't stand going back home ashamed. "3 years. And my honey bunch waited for me. I didn't get a Dear John letter. I come home. Where I lived when I came back?
Yeah.
I lived right close to Milwaukee, but it was like afterwards it became a suburb. Actually, the address was 135 North 135th Street.
Were you married after you got home?
I was lucky. My sweetheart waited. I was overseas for 31 months. A lot of guys got their John letters, if you know what I mean. They got tired of waiting. They got a new boyfriend and got married to them. My little honey waited for me, and we were married in church, and her father gave us a nice wedding reception at the Pfister Hotel. That cost him a bundle, but I'll never forget it. We had a beautiful dinner there, and the guy played. That's where it got me again. We saw an article in the paper where a farmer was quitting farming and he was dividing his land, and we went out. He was English, and we went out, and in spite of the fact that this was advertised in the paper, my wife and I were the only two people that showed up. So he says, "Leave your car here, get in mine," and he did go up. And he said, "No, if I was going to build, here's where I build. You're high, you don't take any water, and you're just far enough away from Capitol Drive so you don't hear the semis all night long." And we put the lot. When the guy came to put the road through, I said, "Would you dig my hole?" He said, "Yeah, and I could do it cheap. All my material's right here." My brother-in-law was a mason, so I mixed the mortar, and he laid up the blocks, and we set the house on top. I had a prefab. It was called a Harnischfeger home. It came in sections. You put it together like a big jigsaw. I came back. I didn't buy in Milwaukee. I bought in a suburb of Milwaukee. Well, it wasn't a suburb at that time, but it eventually became. And one day our neighbor came over from the corner. He says, "I want you and your wife to come to my house tonight at 7 o'clock. I thought, what the hell's going on now? We went over there, and well, he had enough chairs for the ladies to sit, and the men all stood behind the chairs. And he says, "We have to do something. If you don't, we're going to be annexed. And you'll be either part of Butler or West Allis, and you'll be paying their kind of taxes." So we decided we wanted to be our own boss. And we went out, took a census. Then I had to go out. I had a certain section, and I had to ask each couple, "Can you spare a quarter? We put all these quarters together, we'll have enough money to pay our lawyers." Some gave me a quarter, some gave me $1. I want to give them change. I came in, I had $26, and I didn't keep a darn cent for myself. I turned the whole shebang in. And I guess the dear Lord liked that, because we ended up winning. We decided to become the city of Brookfield, and 7 days later, every telephone pole had a sign on it about this big. "Notice of annexation, Village of Butler." They were 7 days too late. We became the city of
Did you get another job?
Yeah, it was a little hard to do. When I came back to the States, the war was ending, and there was no more war production. Consequently, there were no jobs on hand. And if you didn't really know somebody, it was very, very hard to get a job, at least for the next 6 to 12 months.
So what did you do for a living when you came back?
Oh, well, the first thing I ever had was a paper route, and when I came back from the service, I got a job at the Fresh Steel Tank Company, and I learned how to operate different machines, and I stayed there for about 5 years, and then one day a buddy of mine came over, told me where he had found some nice lots, and we built a home out there, and then I got a different job, and so I wouldn't have so far to go. The truth is strange. One time I got laid off, my wife even got a job in the cemetery, not digging graves. In the office, people were buying lots. Maybe they're paying $1 a month till they get a thing. All this had to be kept records of. So she kept our ship afloat. No. Well, to a certain extent. One time, I'll tell you, we were just barely married, and we had upstairs an apartment about a block and a half away from a park. and somebody set off some fireworks here, and then bam, 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 and just like that, I'm laying next to the bed. She looks at me like, are you nuts? Well, that's what you're talking about. If something starts, get down.
Did you talk with your wife much about when you?
No, we didn't. Once in a while, if she wanted me to do something and I felt that I didn't care to do that, and I'd explain to her why, and then usually we worked it out. Yes. She's owns property in Florida, and she says, "Pops, anytime you want, you can come down here." I think I just as soon stay here. I don't know. I feel safer here in Wisconsin. I've been to Florida. I drove my own car down there one time. We parked it in a public garage, hopped in the boat, and went to Nassau in the Bahamas, my wife and I. That was interesting. It was one of the nicest trips we ever took. And we got up early in the morning and we took a walk down to the Central Park, and here were guys they had like a horse and a coach behind it with just two wheels. The driver sat up here and you sat down below. So we hopped in one of those and he took us through, and that was interesting because otherwise you go through town and it's just a red brick building, but he told us what the building was, what they make there, and I know that would make the trip a lot interesting. You know, if they're making automobile parts, or if they're making whatever, that makes the trip a lot more interesting. Otherwise it's just another red brick building, you know. And I enjoyed that very, very much. And well, we came back from home. We went to Europe twice, and we went to the Bahamas. Very wonderful woman. If I had to do over, I'd marry her again. She's already in heaven. But first, you know, like I said, cancer, one breast, and the other one. Then even the doctor swore. He says, if she'd have come 6 months sooner, I could have saved her. But cancer was the scourge of my life. It killed both Grandma Bergman and Grandma Schmidt, and it killed my mother, my father, and my wife. And then maybe one of these days somebody will find a cure for it. And I'll shake that guy's wife died, and I didn't want to live out there by myself. And she had it fixed out so I could come to a place like this where I have my own little room, and I come down to the mess hall and I order my meal from a menu, and I feel safe at night, and I got nice food to eat. Don't get no better than that.